It's really funny having this come full circle because I met Brian 10 years ago when I joined a firm called Ignition Partners, where I think I was just a toddler at the time, not knowing how to spell software or hardware. And it's funny seeing this come full circle. I don't really have the linear path to VC like most people do. I grew up in a state called Montana in a city called Great Falls, which is essentially the agricultural hub of the state, where most of the farmland was just north. My mom actually grew up on a 20,000-acre wheat barley farm, one-room schoolhouse. They had paddle for kids in that area of the world. I went to the University of Montana on a high jump scholarship with football and things, and I graduated in May of '09 with a finance degree. And of course, I wanted to do investment banking, as everyone was talking about at the time. Montana grad, non-target school, May of '09, kind of hard to pull out. And so that's when I wanted to get a little bit more creative. I combed through the alumni Rolodex and I found a gentleman named John Connors, who's also a Grizz, who happened to be the CFO of Microsoft, who was then running a firm called Ignition Partners. Built a great relationship with him. It'll come full circle here shortly. Started my career in LA area from called KPMG, auditing asset-backed securities. So after the global financial crisis, of course, auditors, 22, 23 years old, were getting hired from all over the place to come comb through all these mortgage documents to make sure all the stuff that was articulated on the tape, the CSV file, wasn't complete BS. Then made a pit stop in the Bay Area in 2011 through 2013, where I ended up doing technology investment banking. And that was a very formative point of my career. I was 23, 24 years old. But if you think about San Francisco at that time, Facebook was just going public. Twitter was just going public. Every single Sand Hill Road farm just made the city of San Francisco their HQ too. Uber was just getting going. The city was infectious. It was electric. And so you wanted to participate in whatever this thing of early stage software, entrepreneurship, investing, whatever that thing was, I had to be a part of it. At this time, I had done 2 years of technology investment banking. It was hard work. It was really fun work. Ignition Partners had just got the fifth fundraise, the 2013 vintage. John was running the show. We had built a great relationship, and he was looking to hire an associate, really to get him more leverage on his time. And so that was a big decision to leave the Bay Area when all that activity was happening. But two things were really, really clear, which is the Seattle ecosystem, which we'll talk a lot about today, was clearly emerging on the global stage, essentially going from an interesting regional city that, of course, rains a lot to the city where the internet runs through it. And then the reality is when you're 25, 26 years old, you have no idea if you're going to be a good early stage venture capitalist. You just know, you just don't. Anyone that tells you otherwise is full of BS. And so I moved to Seattle in 2013. I lived on Amazon's campus actually from 2013 to 2020, essentially saw that city within a city get built. And then fast forward to the summer of 2019, Ignition essentially decided not to continue raising funds. The senior partners got to a stage of life where that didn't make sense. They had built amazing track records, backed amazing companies like DocuSign, Splunk, Cloudera, Apptio, PagerDuty. It was time. And that was the genesis for us to infuse out to build a firm to dedicate our entire investing careers to backing the most innovative software companies in cloud, SaaS, AI, machine learning, getting built right here in our backyard. So you can go to the next slide.
Is an early stage venture capital.
And you can bear with me, this is unconventional, but you'll get the gist here shortly. So you can click it one more time to play the audio. Go back.
Fuse is an early stage venture capital firm investing in software companies that are reinventing the modern economy with a focus on enterprise software, data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. The mission for every investment is to build a world-beating, iconic company. Fuse has an expansive strategic LP base that consists of Bank of Montreal and executives at the Pacific Northwest top companies, including Microsoft, Amazon, Starbucks, Costco, T-Mobile, Avalara, Smartsheet, Oracle, Facebook, Snowflake, and many more. Fuse engages their LP base to accelerate value in every portfolio investment, giving companies an unfair advantage to win and drive better investment performance.
That is not my voice. That is a software company that we invested in. And essentially, I took a piece of text, edited it really quickly, pumped it into the software application called Well Said Labs, and you have lifelike voices in multiple dialects multiple languages, multiple genders, essentially targeting the exact audience that you ever want to target for internal learning applications, sales demos, etc. That is the type of innovation that is happening here in the Pacific Northwest. As you can see here, when we decided to start Fuse, we were the first firm of Series A scale focused on that region, started in over 2 decades. And if you look at the makeup of this city, not only do you have Microsoft and Amazon, that was a big surprise, and it still shocks people to this day when we tell everyone that we are in fact the first firm north of $100 million fund to get started here in this geo in the last 20 years. Everything we do at Fuse is early stage software investing. That traverses from pre-seed, where it's usually very experienced founders, very good resumes, very big market, but we're not taking really founder risks. These are more experienced folks that we're backing at that pre-seed. And then we can write all the way up to an $8 or $9 million Series A check, where 90% of our capital goes. But everything that we're doing is investing in early stage software companies here in Seattle, Vancouver, Portland, and even to Calgary. Every time we make an investment, as you heard with the audio, we pull it into this community that we built that consists of C-level execs at every single company in this area that is really an accelerant in terms of talent and in terms of customers. A big part of why we decided to start a firm really centered around this region, not only is there lack of capital, but this is the area that software is built. My partner Brendan was playing golf with a guy visiting from out of town, and he said, "Where's your office?" Well, Brendan said, "Well, we're based actually not in Seattle, but in downtown Bellevue." He said, "Oh, wow, Bellevue, the city that software built." And this image alone from the last 25 years, the city is almost unrecognizable. Not only do you have Microsoft buildings, you have the Symetra building, you have Amazon buildings going up. We were actually applying for a lease. We were 2 weeks away from moving into a new building, and we get the call that Amazon took down the entire lease, and they essentially had to kick out every single tenant that was planning to move in. That's happening all over in Bellevue. And then, of course, you have all the activity in South Lake Union and broader Seattle, really as a result of the cloud innovation that's happened here. What's also really attractive about this region in this moment in time is you think about the most important technologies that have ever emerged in our lifetimes. First, you could argue it was the desktop computer, then maybe it was the handheld device. Well, it was certainly this total tech revolution called the cloud, where there's over 100 billion of revenue actually generated from products getting built here in Seattle. Google Cloud is the first building you see when you get on Amazon's campus is Google Cloud. You of course have AWS, you have Azure, you have Oracle Cloud now doing 8 billion run rate. So 100 billion worth revenue of cloud products all getting built in this region. But you also think about what this means for the next set of innovation. You've had this emerging wave of cloud. What does that mean for the next 10 years? Seattle is now emerging as one of the top ecosystems in the world, not just in the US. You have the Bay Area, Seattle, you have Shanghai, Toronto, and this really important and interesting thing called AI and machine learning. And so the setup for this region, not only for the last 10 years, but for the foreseeable future with this AI wave, is a really attractive setup combined with lower valuations in this market research to be investing in this area. Go to the next. Looking back at my predecessor firm, Ignition Partners, talked about the grade 6 fund 2-decade run. Well, they got started in 1999 and 2000. And of course, when we started Fuse, you want to do what worked well, and you want to avoid the pitfalls. You don't want to make the mistakes that they made. We like to say learning on somebody else's nickel. And so we got together with all the Ignition founders and really tried to set what worked and what didn't work. And the unanimous feedback was, well, crap, we were probably 15 years too late or too early. I think you would love to be your age is doing what you're doing now and building a firm behind all the activity on entrepreneurship happening now. Well, if you unpack that statement, there was one company on this slide that mattered in technology, just one, and that was Microsoft. Amazon was not what it is today. It didn't have all the HQ2s of Google, of Facebook, of Oracle, of Salesforce, and it certainly didn't have the emerging SaaS leaders, the next generation of SaaS leadership going through with unicorns like iCertis and Outreach, public companies like Smartsheet. You just didn't have that in the ecosystem. So Ignition was trying to essentially siphon off founders, spinning out of Microsoft. So you didn't have the tributaries, you didn't have the diversity of the entrepreneurial talent like you do today. What's also really important that isn't included on this slide is you have this foundation funded by Paul Allen called AI2. $100 million of non-dilutive money goes into AI2 every single year to attract worldwide leaders in AI and machine learning. And they're moving here from Poland, they're moving here from England, they're moving here from Asia, from India, to work on some of the most interesting humanitarian causes in AI and machine learning. Well, every now and then, one of those causes gets commercialized into an actual company, and Fuse is proud to have backed two of those companies, Wilson Labs, that you've heard, and then a recent one in Fund 2 called Robotic. And then lastly, I usually go in rule 3, but we're talking rule 5 here with the anchor tenants, the HQ2s, the SAF, and then this AI2 foundation. You have a top 10 computer science and business academic institution in UW. So the recipe of this ecosystem is really attractive to invest behind, but without the capital here. There just hasn't been a ton of capital here. No, the next. If you look at the amount of company formation and exit activity, the Bay Area obviously went through the dot-com boom of 1999 to 2000. Well, the amount of entrepreneurial activity companies formed, exit value, in the last few years actually mirrors the Bay Area of that vintage, those vintage years. And you look at what that's snowballed into in terms of company formation, wealth creation, public company outcomes. Seattle is actually mirroring what the Bay Area was in 1999, 2000 today. And so if you think about also investing from a timing standpoint and what the future potential holds, you'd love to be one of the only firms getting started in the Bay Area in 1999 and not having a ton of competition from a capital standpoint. They always say that something's in the water here in the Pacific Northwest. You have not only Microsoft and Amazon, but let's talk about some of the iconic leaders. We visited to the East Coast, of course, on many of our fundraising trails, and everyone always kind of asks, what the hell is going on in Seattle? And it's pretty shocking how few know that Starbucks is based here, Nordstrom is based here, REI is based here, Expeditors, PACCAR, Boeing originally based here. Most people have no idea that Costco is based here, or Nike's in Portland. There's something in the water. Iconic companies get built here. And that just shows up in the multiple of capital available here relative to total exit. This is a simple multiple chart of the total dollar based in Seattle relative to the total exit value of companies based in Seattle. And what the big mistake is, a lot of the founders that built companies here have been forced to go to the Bay Area. They've been forced to go to the Bay Area or New York for their capital. And our view, as it relates to Fuse, is that early stage venture really is a local business. There's not a lot of information. The founders need help. Your differentiation is your ability to help. And that is our LP community. That's our team here at Fuse. And then eventually you get to the Series B where, the big differentiator is price. Who pays the highest multiple, who earns the seat at the table. But at the earliest stages, early venture, pre-seed, seed, and Series A, that is a local business. And if you don't believe me, look at the behavior of the Silicon Valley firms. HQ1 of every Sand Hill Road firm, of course, is in Sand Hill Road, Menlo Park. HQ2, where is it? It's not New York, it's not Seattle. It is an hour drive north in the city of San Francisco in South Park. And that is because every firm in the Bay Area views that you got to have boots on the ground, you got to be close to the metal of where the heat is happening. And you can't do that by forcing firms to drive from the city, forcing entrepreneurs to drive from the city all the way down to the South Bay. It's about a 4-hour commitment there and back, including the meeting. That just doesn't work. And so you got to be close to the metal of where the founders are actually innovating and where they need capital. What's beautiful about the future here is you have these anchor tenants that have attracted amazing machine learning and AI talent. Microsoft, of course, has a partnership with OpenAI and ChatGPT. You can argue that OpenAI is now 50% Seattle-based because Microsoft owns, 49% of it. But because these companies are now improving their tooling in the app layer of the stack, that next generation of services that they need to offer, AI is everywhere. AI is the future. And because you have Microsoft, Amazon, and Google Cloud all based here, the number one profile of the type of people that they're recruiting to this region is AI and machine learning talent. And so if you look at the Fuse portfolio, almost every single company, whether it's AI-led like Wilson Labs or AI is part of the solution like fraud detection in the form of OWL, you are going to see data, AI, machine learning, almost every single product that's getting started today here and included in the products in the last couple of years. What's also really interesting is every time there's a market map, it's too late if you're an early stage venture investor. Now you've missed the boat. And if you are close to the metal on where some of the earliest innovation is happening, you actually spot these trends before the broader market is, because the talent here is working on some of that, next generation thought leadership and innovation. And there's this category called generative AI. Everyone's talking about it. It's in every slide deck. Most of it's complete. It's not real, but it's certainly in every slide deck. And every single investor is forcing every single founder to think about what generative AI should mean to the business, or how do they include it in the products. Well, the reality is it's not going to be included in every product, but it sure is going to be in every pitch deck. Well, there's this huge wave happening right now where tons of investment dollars are going into this new hype category. We're in peak hype. Every investor is trying to put money behind it. We were proud that we were in two companies well before this hype actually happened and before the category was even defined. Pictory being for video and WealthSet being for audio. And if you're in these pockets of innovation where this is happening, you spot these trends before the other investors do. You happen to be there before everyone else catches word and before it's popular. And then when it becomes popular, these companies are significantly further along. They're much more mature from a product standpoint, but also from a business model standpoint, which is why these are two of the fastest growing companies, not only in the Pacific Northwest, but probably in the overall category. One more really interesting real world example, there's a lot of talk about ESG out there. And we've been paying, a little bit of interest to this category because it's becoming, much more hot. Every company's being held more accountable. We really think about it as it relates to the future of audit. There's a new category emerging of how every company needs to benchmark and compare themselves and essentially audit themselves on their carbon footprint. But no one in the right mind would think that AI can be applied to eradicate weeds. And Cameron probably talked about this company yesterday because it's one of our very favorite companies. But the video will bring AI technology applied to the farming vertical to eradicate weeds to life. And me talking about it doesn't do the justice, so please play the video. Pretty cool stuff. If you look at an onion weeded by carbon robotics versus an onion that was treated via a herbicide, it's about twice the size. Twice the size. And so farmers not only have way better output in terms of crop yield, because that is regenerative to the soil, because it zaps the weed using machine vision to identify what is a weed, what is the actual crop, and then uses precision lasers to shoot a laser beam off of a mirror, and it shoots it straight down vertically to hit the weed. And it's going at several miles per hour. So that software is firing quickly and getting faster and faster and faster. Most people think if I ever wanted to go innovate in this category of agriculture, particularly weed eradication, I'm going to try to come up with a safer, less cancer-causing herbicide. Who would think that AI has actually permeated the world of weed eradication, and that type of innovation, again, is built right here in the city of Seattle. Lastly, is I'll relate to carbon. Most enterprise software sales cycles usually take, 6 months at a minimum if you're lucky, but generally 12 months and oftentimes 18 months. Those things sell for $1 million for a pop and often get purchased in the first meeting. And so amazing business model leverage because you're going right to the decision maker, which is the farm owner. It's net ROI positive and it's completely reshaping an entire category that every human on this planet needs, which is called food. Last slide that we always include in every single deck, this is the first slide we put together as it relates to Fuse, is our values. Interestingly enough, if you look at some of the best performing companies that I've at least ever been around, one of the first things that they always do when they form the company and then they treat every single stakeholder with is their value system, not only their employees, not only their investors, but also their customers. And so we include this in every single deck. It's the most important slide. We don't take it lightly with how we work with every founder and every team member at Fuse. And with that, happy to open up to any questions.
You need to get that laser beam sooner.
I mean, seriously. New form factor, right?
Yeah. Did we hear the question? What's the consumer application for laser beaming?
You have the automated lawnmowers, right? Currently, I've seen a couple of friends have those, but we need that for the backyard.
Questions, comments? What are you most excited about? By the way, can you take that voice and create like a Russian immigrant who was taught by a British tutor? Can you give me that accent?
I can go certainly love.
Just 16.
The good thing about Wellset is,
That's also a dangerous thing.
oh, well, this is how we got there. We tracked this company for about 3 years before we invested, and our biggest concern was, well, not necessarily a concern, but we wanted to see it play out, was your code of ethics, because you can really train on somebody's voice, and next thing you know, you have marks out there talking about something, saying something, that you wouldn't like public, but it's done with an AI synthesized voice. Like that stuff is really scary. And with the advancements in AI, pretty soon that's going to be video enabled. It's going to look like an actual person saying something when in fact it wasn't them. And so looking at Wellset, one of the most important diligence items was around their ethics on how they treat their voices, who they treat, how they do their royalty model. They're not really going to train actually on consumer voices, or I don't think they are at least, because of all the risks that somebody could go do something nefarious with not an approved voice. And so their moat around having really high quality but a narrower set of voices is an important part of why enterprises are buying them, because they're not worried about replicating Anthony Bourdain's voice or someone that they just don't have the rights to do so.
Have you seen an uptick in interest among your portfolio companies after OpenAI came out with ChatGPT?
It's in every single conversation now. Not only what should we be doing with OpenAI or ChatGPT or the GPT-4 model, on how we get significant improvements internally on the business, higher engineering velocity, and then where do we embed it into our products? So it's coming up in every board discussion right now. I think the biggest frenzy, and I can't imagine how long the line is everyone wants early access to be a plugin for ChatGPT. It is by far the fastest growing product. I don't know how many users it has, but I think it's well over 100 million in amount of weeks, maybe even days. And so everyone wants access to the eyeballs, because if that's going to be the command interface for any one of us, ranging from people with the technical sophistication of my mother all the way down to the most sophisticated software developer, that is becoming the interface on where new productivity gains. So everyone wants access to be the plugin. We haven't quite cracked the code there, but we have a couple angles in, for sure. But I will say, the paranoia and urgency around what ChatGPT can be to them, it might be unhealthy, but it's useful.
Yeah, Cal, thanks for coming out. I've got some friends here from New York and Palo Alto. Great stuff that you are doing. It's been great to see what you've done for the city and what you've done for the community. If you could share with some of my friends a little bit about how this innovation and technology has fueled the city from an attractor of talent being one. I firmly believe that Seattle's one of the best cloud talent repositories in the world. Right? And let's talk about, a little bit about how this infrastructure and this wave of capital in the city has fueled, our friends at the Kraken, second year team in the playoffs. Little birdie told me we might see our Sonics back in a couple of years, but how is Seattle, through innovation and tech, really starting to improve the lives of the people in the community?
Well, I think the dead giveaway on the Sonics is that they already have a label somewhere inside the stadium of where they're going to be actually housed for the locker rooms. That's something that works. The first on your comments about the talent here, it really comes down to the criticality of the cloud and what that has meant for the city and where it's going. I think I will fundamentally, lay on my deathbed saying the cloud is the most important technology shift of our lifetimes. It essentially enables innovation and company building to get built anywhere. You can buy, you can sell, you can build products anywhere now because of the cloud, because of the innovation, all originally conceptualized here in Seattle. We go to New York, like I mentioned, and people would always ask, why aren't you looking in Texas? Why aren't you looking in Florida? Well, I learned using ChatGPT, talking about a product, that the amount of software engineers in the Puget Sound area, not including Vancouver, Portland, or Calgary, is more than the entire state of Texas and Austin combined. And so there's just such a big disconnect on the perception of this area and the opportunity here relative to the actual underlying momentum and innovation. And it really comes down to, I think, one thing, and we've been saying this for a while. John's probably been saying it for longer. I learned this 10 years when I moved here, that Seattle just isn't as good at marketing like the Bay Area, like New York. It's a really understated ethos here, and very Nordic ethos. There's all this really innovation, but no one really knows that it's really going on here if you don't live here. Which really also has been attractive, and we'll see how this plays out, is one of the biggest competitive edges was no state income tax. And there still is no state income tax, for example, capital gains tax. And so not only do you have this really high talent density, building some of the most complicated products in our world, you also have a model advantage here of no state income tax, which if you're Google, if you're Oracle, if you're Facebook, you'd much rather put talent here relative to the tax model, if that's the case, and there's the talent pool here. It's a big reason why Jeff Bezos actually started Amazon in Seattle. It actually is one of the very few reasons that he decided to start Amazon here. And look what that company's done to propel Seattle to the global stage. Question? I got. Yeah, there's another face. What did you think of pickleball today?
I got my ass kicked. It's really hard. You play pickleball, Kellen?
I have one once. Yeah. So I didn't want to go through the embarrassment this morning.
This is my first time.
So
I wanted to ask you, and
wasn't it invented on Cambridge, by the way?
Yes. Let's see.
Yeah. Was it at your house?
Another thing.
Yeah. Are you Mr. Pickleball?
Where's Dave? You can answer all these questions.
We have the next version of.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about whether or not you'll stray outside of the Pacific Northwest. Like, let's say you have a connection to a founder and you're getting connected, to another founder that they know, or would you move outside the Northwest on a selective basis, or do you really feel like the thesis is to stay here? Just kind of curious what your answer would be.
We wake up every single day looking to find back and build companies in the Pacific Northwest. But with that said, every VC, every time they speak, they're marketing to the entrepreneur they haven't met yet. That's just the reality of how this business works. So you always want to keep the door open just a little bit should you need to be opportunistic, right founder, right category, right ways we can help. So we will do it. We've done it a couple of times, but we wake up every single day looking to find back and build the next generation of iconic companies here. And it's really, the reality is it's hard to course correct if you're not local. These early stage companies, they're iterating all day long. They're wandering the desert a little bit till they find water. It's much harder to course correct if you're not there in person. And we even think about this with companies built based here with board members called in the Bay Area, New York. Imagine your board member asking you to riff half your employee base. You've never met this board member in person. Well, this is happening every single day now. This has been the status quo for the last couple of years in this just-in-time Zoom investing environment. And so we just believe that early stage VC, the ability to drive alpha, the ability to access the best entrepreneurs is fundamentally local business. And that's where you can really do a better job.
I was curious, since you work so deeply in AI, what do you think are the leaders as far as think tanks, companies, and governments kind of pushing AI forward, and if any of those are concerns you?
You know, I would argue in terms of the earliest stage and the humanitarian AI thinking, I would say AI too is unparalleled. They have some great people over there. In full disclosure, I'm a personal investor in their commercial fund. But I think just the types of innovation and companies and just thinking that gets done there, the brain trust that is AI too, is well advanced. It was cool before it was cool. But they were, doing some of this AI research well before it now is talked about today. I think Microsoft has done a phenomenal job, and I think they've done a particular phenomenal job staying out of the antitrust radar. They learned their lessons in 2000, 2001, it sounds like, but they have done a phenomenal job about partnering with the leader while having the infrastructure. It's all built on Azure. So they've done a really, really good job. I think Google has and Apple have really missed the boat. You think about Siri, that should have been, the ChatGPT interface as it relates to voice. And you even talk to Siri, say, hey, play me a song on Spotify, it's on my device, it can't even execute that command. And so Apple missed the boat. I think Google is trying to play catch up. I think they will catch up fast. But I think Microsoft has done a really phenomenal job. Amazon's still TBD. But that's kind of how I stack rank them. Is Microsoft significantly in the lead, especially with their allegiance to OpenAI. I think it's going to also propel them into a real player in the search game. Whereas having tried to revitalize Bing just from the ground up would not have worked. But this whole embed OpenAI, have this partnership with OpenAI, that's kind of put them at that, the Google-like altitude in short order without taking that brand risk. It was a brilliant, brilliant move. It didn't help when they had a huge error in the presentation when they unleashed Bard and they talk about an unforced error. But I think it'll be quick. I think in the next 6 months they'll have something that they can really, because what they're doing with their crawler technology, it's a lot of AI. It's now just presenting it in a way that feels more like commands, actions, really elevating their search game. Yeah. It's going to be an arms race really quickly, because can Google avoid too much mind share shift to ChatGPT? That's really the trade-off here, is how fast can you do it before the behavior shift happens where you're starting to rely. And just an example, yesterday, when I went to look at how many software engineers there are in Texas and Austin and Florida, instead of using Google, I use ChatGPT. It's the first time I've ever really made that leap. But conversely, the first thing I ever ChatGPT, you're going to need a better name for it actually, because Google just kind of rolls on top of it. Was tell me about Fuse in Seattle. And it was founded in 2012.
Does it sound pretty good?
Which is not true. Its founders have been in its history with two other people that I have no idea, and also categorically wrong, has invested in a bunch of companies that we did not invest in. So it was categorically wrong. It wasn't even the right mission people. And so there's still a lot of errors that need to be worked through before it can be relied on.
We haven't done that here.
Critical infrastructure. Right now, it's a really big curiosity. It will eventually mature and be repurposed. It's not there. It's not there.
Just mark this when we're in.
Yeah, I got you. Get the recording.
Insurance use. All this.
I don't know why the clicker wasn't working.
Earlier questions, I grew up in Paris today, but you say Pacific West, yeah. What are your view are the rules in Portland and Vancouver, and what activities in those cities and funders in those cities?
Well, I think I've just
I
got
don't know why it was like 3 feet out.
And there's always been a lot of exciting things happening in Portland. You have one of the most iconic brands in the world, the biggest producer of clothing wear all over the world, right? But where was Zoom Info started? It was started across the water where there's no state income tax in the city of Vancouver, Washington, not Vancouver, Canada. And that just kind of tells you what you need to know in terms of people are rational. People are rational. They go where the higher quality life is and where it makes economic sense. And so Portland versus Vancouver, if it's going to be a less onerous tax system, you're probably going to headquarter in Vancouver because it makes rational sense. As much as you might want to live in Portland, the rational economic thing to do for all your stakeholders as a board member and CEO is to headquarter the company in Vancouver. And you look at a lot of these behavioral shifts or migration patterns happening, people I think are just rational. They're rational. They go where the higher ROI is, they go where the higher quality of life is, and they have a responsibility as a founder to do that too, as a board member, to do that for every single stakeholder. It is your fiduciary responsibility to do the rational economic thing that makes sense.
Now, meanwhile, think of the occupancy in buildings, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, it's not faring so well. How do you look at the urban environment in which you're living? Working?
Well, you've seen Bellevue has had a way different occupancy level than Seattle. In Bellevue, you know, you had a lot of these break-ins and whatnot in the city of Seattle. Well, they made this a huge push to recruit business to actually move across the water. And it's not like it's the same as going from San Jose to San Francisco. It's 6 miles away. I live in Seattle. It takes me 15 minutes door to door to go from Madison Valley, Capitol Hill area, all the way to downtown Bellevue. And in the office, in my seat, 15 minutes. So it's not a onerous shift to lift and shift a business or you know, company roles over to the east side. And there's been a lot of outspoken critics of the head tax here. You know, Amazon, every time the city would say head tax here, they would put a lot of their staff over on the east side. Similarly, Manny Medina of Outreach IO, he was starting to get concerned because, again, people are rational. Most of my employees live on the east side, but it's cooler to be in Seattle, but now it's more expensive. What do I do as a rational CEO? I move to Bellevue. There is going to be, you know, a lot of our investors in our fund are real estate people. It's going to be pretty interesting to see the pain that's going to come from the, you know, the default rates, the refinancing risks, et cetera. Just read today that Brookfield took a huge loss on about 150 million, and you know, we'll see what's more to come on that. That's something that we're paying pretty close attention to. On the remote work side, remote's nothing new. The reality is every single company I was part of during my time at Ignition where remote work wasn't popular, there was no discussion of remote work. Every single company had an offshore office, whether it was in India, whether it was in the Philippines. You know, that's essentially similar. They might be in an office, but it's the same thing really is remote work. So this whole remote work thing is nothing new. I think you'll see a lot of people, especially high performers, have the ability to work where they want to live. But there's also this big push to get people back into the office now. Big push. And we've been in the office every single day since we started the firm 3 years ago, February 24th, 2020, in the office every single day.
Come join our 361 firm community of investors and thought leaders. We have a lot of events created by the community as we collaborate on investments and philanthropic interests. Join us.